The storms drove me out of Utah a full 3 days ahead of schedule. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel across 11 hours of open highway, and my eyes felt like someone had worked sand into them. I rolled into the driveway just past 4 in the afternoon, already thinking about the hot shower and the cold iced tea I'd earned. The front door was unlocked. That fact landed somewhere in the back of my exhausted mind. A small wrongness I nearly let pass. Welcome back to Dad's Revenge. Glad you're here for this one. Before we get into it, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Just drop a quick note, are you listening? While you're driving somewhere, puttering around the kitchen, winding down for the night. Whatever you're doing, I'm glad you made time for this story. One small note before we begin. Some elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes, and any resemblance to specific real individuals is coincidental. It's the truth underneath the story that matters. Marin never left a door unlocked. I shouldered my way in hiking pack still dangling from my shoulder, and it hit me before I'd taken 2 steps that smell. Closed up mustiness with something fouler beneath it. A house that hadn't breathed in days. Then from somewhere near the front room, a sound reached me. Low, wet, barely a voice at all. I was moving before I'd thought about it. The trail pack hit the tile with a crash. I registered only distantly because my legs were already carrying me toward the living room, pulse hammering. The curtains were half shut, the room trapped in gray afternoon shadow, and there she was. Della folded over in her wheelchair beside the window, like something had gone out of her, lips split and raw. The water bowl next to her chair hadn't seen liquid in a long time. You could read the history in the dried rings left on the inside evaporation, over days, not hours. Days. A plate on the tray table had gone so stale, it had sealed to itself. And when I made myself look at her clothing, my stomach dropped, soiled, adhered to her skin. Della, can you hear me? 30 years in a courtroom had given me that voice measured, controlled, and it held even as my fingers trembled against her wrist, searching for a pulse. It was there, faint, but there. Her lids moved without opening. I had my phone out almost before the thought formed. The 911 call was still connecting when that old case-building reflex took over. I lifted the camera, shot the empty bowl. The refrigerator near her care station stocked full every item she'd need, none of it touched. The pressure sores already forming along her arms. Every photo carried a timestamp. Those timestamps would matter. 911. What's your emergency spores? Ambulance needed at 3819 Copper Sage Court in Henderson. My ex-wife, she's unresponsive, severely dehydrated. She's gone without care for several days. The paramedics were at the door in 12 minutes. I read their faces as they came through the shift from clinical to something grimmer as they took in the full picture. The younger paramedic, quick and capable, had an IV line going, while her partner documented the scene with the same systematic eye I'd just been using. Any idea how long she's been on her own? When was somebody last here with her? I steadied my voice. My daughter was supposed to be here. That was the arrangement. She watches her mother while I'm traveling. I wasn't due back until tomorrow. They moved efficiently, questions coming in a clip. I answered each one, while another part of my brain was already elsewhere. Where was Marin? 4 days ago, she'd sent me a text. Everything fine. I'd reached her by phone twice after that. Both calls short, her voice a little flat, nothing that tripped any alarm. Had she still been in the house by then? Or had those calls been lies she was feeding me from across an ocean? They took Della fast when we reached the hospital. I stood in the ER waiting area, still wearing what I'd had on during the drive, hands finally gone, still working through the intake forms by reflex. An hour and a doctor appeared, lean, graying at the temples, carrying the particular weight that comes from too many years of bad news. Mr. Holt, what I need you to hear is how serious this is. Stage 2 pressure ulcers, kidneys under severe stress from dehydration. This wasn't a matter of a missed day. We're estimating 4, possibly 5 days, with no meaningful care. Where was the person responsible for her? It landed like a verdict. I didn't look away. That's the question I'm working on. My daughter won't pick up. 7 attempts by that point. 7. Each one rolling to voicemail and tightening something in my jaw. A nurse came over quieter in her manner than the doctor. Cases like this trigger a mandatory report. Adult Protective Services will be in contact. I gave her one slow nod. I understand. Whatever they need, I'll provide. The truth was, I didn't have much to give them yet. That ignorance sat in my chest like a stone. Under the waiting room's fluorescent wash, the kind of light that makes living faces look like something else, I took out the small notebook I'd worn the pocket out of over 30 years. Case notes, always case notes. Pen down facts first. June 15th, 4:17 p.m. Arrived home ahead of schedule. Found Della unresponsive. Medical team estimating 4 to 5 days of neglect. Marin last confirmed present June 10th phone call. Marin not responding. 7 attempts. Refrigerator fully stocked, contents unused. Pattern consistent with deliberate abandonment. I pulled up Marin's name in my recent calls. All those red icons stacked against it. 3 years I'd bankrolled this arrangement, her living in my house, rent-free, covering her bills, while she told me how exhausted she was, how much she was giving up to be there for her mother. I'd believed it, every word. My thumb drifted to the social media icon. She'd called it harassment the one time I'd scrolled through her posts, so I'd left it alone. Months of leaving it alone. Not tonight. I searched her name, and when the results loaded, I sat there for a moment before I tapped through. The images came up in sequence, and each one landed like a blow. Marin posed at the base of the Eiffel Tower, June 11th. Marin and Cade at a Paris cafe, glasses raised mid-laugh, June 12th. Marin loaded down with designer shopping bags, June 13th. And today, June 15th. She had been in Paris for 5 days. The words under the Eiffel Tower photo stopped everything. Finally, a break from those miserable old people. I read it again, then a third time. Then I started working through her feed the way I'd worked through evidence files, screenshot, scroll, screenshot. Prosecutor mode, full activation. Document, timestamp, verify. I studied backgrounds, checked image data, cataloged the high-end restaurants spotted the lobby of a luxury hotel caught in a mirror's edge. Nobody books a trip like that on a budget. While Della was failing in my living room, Marin was spending thousands of dollars in Paris. I opened my calendar. I'd left for Utah on June 8th. My scheduled return June 16th tomorrow. Marin had cleared out on June 10th, 2 days behind me. 4 to 5 days of neglect. I mapped it against the dates. The fit was seamless. Too seamless. She'd had my itinerary. She'd run the calculation departure window, how many days she could stretch it. The latest she could stay gone before I'd walk in and find what she'd left behind. She'd used her own mother as a variable in that equation. A nurse touched my arm, gently drawing me back from wherever I'd gone. Mr. Holt, your ex-wife is stable. They're transferring her to the ICU now. You'll be able to go in once she's settled. Thank you. Flat, automatic. Prognosis. What are we looking at long term? It's still early for anything definitive. Kidney function is the main concern right now. The next 24 hours will tell us more. Extended care is certain regardless. Weeks at minimum. Weeks in a hospital bed, months clawing back to baseline, all of it traceable back to one woman's decision to book a flight to Paris. I pushed out through the ER doors and stood in the parking lot, pulling in air that didn't taste like disinfectant. Desert dusk orange going to purple above the skyline, heat still baking off the pavement. I dug my old leather contacts binder out of the glove compartment holdover from my federal prosecutor year's numbers. In it, I hadn't dialed in a long time. Randall Keene was in there. Defense side now, but we'd faced each other across courtrooms and elder abuse cases, and I knew how he worked. Thorough, precise. He picked up on the third ring. Randall Keene. Randall Warren Holt. A beat of silence. Warren Holt. 4 years, give or take, since the retirement party. What are you calling about? I kept everything out of my voice except the facts. I need a consultation, elder neglect, and I need to sit down with you tomorrow morning, first thing. Whatever your rate is for short notice, I'll cover it. Something changed in his voice, that lawyer antenna picking up a signal. This isn't a referral call, is it? You're inside this one. My daughter left her mother an invalid alone and uncared for the better part of a week while she took a vacation in Paris. My ex-wife came within a day or two of dying in my own house, and I've spent the last 3 years being played by both of them. So, yes, Randall, it's personal. But I want it done right. Every legal avenue Nevada opens up, pursued properly and completely. The line was quiet for a moment. Clear your morning, my office 8 a.m. Bring everything medical records, timeline, a full accounting of expenses. Warren, you're certain you want to go down this road? A family was moving through the parking lot toward the ER entrance. Father carrying a small child, the kid crying into his shoulder. People with ordinary emergencies. 30 years I spent prosecuting those who took advantage of people who couldn't protect themselves. I'm certain. 8 o'clock, coffee will be on. I ended the call and opened my notes app, fingers moving. Everything I could establish as fact. Everything that could be substantiated. Every legal tool Nevada law put within reach for a situation like this. Guardianship challenges, financial exploitation claims, and adult protective services investigation, running parallel criminal referral if the DA saw a viable case. The architecture was there. I needed to build it out properly. By the time they waved me back to the ICU, the sky outside was fully dark. Della's room was hushed, the machines keeping their quiet vigil, her chest moving in slow, shallow rhythm beneath the white of the hospital sheets. They'd cleaned her up, combed her hair. She looked diminished in that hospital bed, fragile in a way that put a knot in my throat. I settled into the chair at her side and took her hand carefully. Her fingers were cool against mine, an IV line taped across the back of her hand. 8 years since the divorce, and I'd never once stopped caring whether she made it through the night. Our daughter apparently had. The window above her bed threw my reflection back at me harder than the face I'd shaved this morning. That flint behind the eyes I knew from old courtroom days. The look I'd get when the case was airtight and I was simply waiting for the right moment. Randall's contact sat confirmed on my phone screen, 8 a.m. Marin had figured I'd walk in just in time. Her timing was right. Everything else she'd figured was wrong. I spent June 16th confirming Della was stabilizing and building every piece of evidence into a structure that would have made my old paralegal proud. By the time I walked into Randall Keene's office the following morning, the manila folder under my arm was the kind of thing that ends arrangements permanently. Randall's building occupied a corner of downtown Las Vegas, glass and steel, catching the early sun at sharp angles. 7th floor elevator doors opening on that old prosecutorial calm that settled over me like slipping on a coat I'd worn for decades. His receptionist had my name. "Mr. Holt Randall's expecting you, conference room B." He rose when I came through the door, older but with the same sharp eyes. We shook hands and I set the folder on the table between us. "Show me what you have." I laid it out piece by piece. Hospital intake forms, itemizing the dehydration and pressure ulcers. Photographs of the empty water bowl, every image carrying a timestamp. Social media, screenshots. Marin grinning at the Eiffel Tower, June 11th, the caption reading, "Finally a break from those miserable old people." Bank records showing $1,800 transferred every month across 3 years, logged as care expenses. A timeline I'd put together, placing everyone exactly where they were and when. Randall held the Paris Post for a long time. Finally, a break from miserable old people. He looked up. She actually posted this while her mother was, "Warren, this goes beyond neglect. This was calculated. I need every legal option on the table. Eviction first. How fast?" He pulled a yellow notepad toward him and started mapping it out. Nevada is landlord-friendly. 30-day notice to quit, no cause required when there's no written lease. What was the basis for their being in the house? 3 years ago, they moved in. The agreement was they'd be there for Della after her stroke. I went along with it because I trusted someone was keeping watch. I hold the deed outright. Not a dollar of rent ever changed hands. Randall made notes, his pen moving in quick, efficient strokes. So, they positioned themselves as caregivers to lock in free housing and a valuable Henderson property. Were you paying them on top of that? $1,800 a month classified as care expenses, which apparently went toward Paris. He nodded slowly, drawing connecting arrows across the notepad. Guardianship should be clean, given the emergency contact designation and what the medical record shows. The eviction is cleaner still, sole ownership, no lease, and they violated whatever implicit agreement gave them standing to be there. He paused. "Warren, are you sure you want to go this far? She's your daughter." I held his gaze steady. "She left a helpless woman to die of thirst. Being my daughter doesn't purchase her a pass." The meeting ran 3 hours. Randall pulled up statutes, made courthouse calls, drafted documents while I sat across from him. Guardianship petition, eviction notice, medical power of attorney. Each one I signed without my hand wavering. I drove to the Henderson house afterward, first time back since the ambulance had pulled away. I needed to see for myself what my money had actually been buying. The living room still carried that stale smell. Della's wheelchair sat empty at the window, positioned right where the paramedics had left it. Upstairs in the rooms Marin and Cade had claimed as their own was a different picture entirely. A 65-inch television mounted on the wall. Designer clothes and the closet boutique tag still attached. New laptops open on the desk. Cade's camera equipment arranged on shelving like a display. I stood there and ran the arithmetic. $1,800 a month, 36 months. $64,800 for care that was never delivered. I locked up and returned to the hospital. Della had been moved out of the ICU to a standard room, her condition steady enough for the step down. I sat with her medical team, signed off on extended treatment, pressed hard on prognosis and therapy timelines, establishing myself as the person making decisions here. I was going through paperwork at the nurse's station when a hospital administrator came over, composed, watchful eyes, careful manner. "Mr. Holt, I wanted to inform you we finally reached your daughter in France. She was quite distressed. She's booking a return flight and asked that we have you contact her." I kept my eyes on the form in front of me. "Tell her I'm available through my attorney. Randall Keene's contact information is on record if she has anything to raise about her mother's care." The administrator held a beat, then walked off. That evening I stood in the hallway outside Della's room while the corridor moved around me. Other families with flowers, conversations kept low, people dealing with ordinary emergencies. I held the envelope Randall's paralegal had handed me, my copy of the eviction notice. Service at the house was set for the following morning, 30 days beginning the moment it hit the door. My phone went off, unknown number, Paris country code. I watched the screen. 8 rings, then voicemail, 3 seconds of quiet, then the same number again. I pressed decline and held it. The next morning opened at 6 o'clock, Marin's number, then Cade's, then a string of international numbers I had no record of. I declined each call and put the phone on silent, turning back to the guardianship paperwork Randall had transmitted overnight. By noon on June 18th, the count had reached 43 calls. Voicemail was full. I listened to one message to confirm what I'd already worked out. "Dad, please. I don't understand what's happening. The hospital says Mom is there. They won't tell me anything. You're not answering. I'm getting on a plane. Dad, please call me back. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. Just call me." That particular edge in her voice, the panic she had had on perfect command since adolescence. The tone that used to make me renegotiate curfews and absorb car payments. I deleted it and shut the phone off entirely. Randall called my office line that afternoon. "Process server confirmed. Notice posted at 0900 this morning, photographed and documented. Your daughter and her boyfriend have until July 17th. Good. Warren, she's been ringing my office 6 times in the past hour. Don't take them." A pause. "You're really going through with this?" "I really am." The following morning, June 19th, I powered the phone back on. 107 missed calls. I moved through the log, Marin's number, Cade's numbers. I couldn't place text messages I left unread. I was in session with Della's physical therapist when the hospital's main line came through. "Mr. Holt, this is Patrice from Patient Services. Your daughter has arrived with another individual. They're attempting to access your ex-wife's room, but the guardianship restriction is on file. Would you like us to? I'll be there in 30 minutes. I didn't rush. Let them wait with the silence for a while. When I stepped into the consultation room, Marin looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days. Likely hadn't. Hair pulled back without care, eyes swollen at the rims. Cade sat next to her, hollow-faced and wrinkled still, wearing what I recognized from his Paris photos. A hospital social worker occupied the head of the table with a professionally neutral expression. Marin came toward me the moment I entered. The social worker started to rise, and I simply lifted one hand. The room stopped. I stayed on my feet. I opened the folder I'd brought, placed the contents on the table one at a time. The Paris Post printed in color, the timestamp circled in red, the medical documentation laying out the neglect timeline, a copy of the eviction notice. "Dad, let me explain. I thought you were getting back on the 16th. I planned to be home before you." My voice stayed flat. The prosecutor's register. "You left on the 10th. I was due back on the 16th. That's 6 days. You left your mother, a woman who cannot stand, cannot speak, cannot feed herself alone for 6 days, because you expected me to arrive first and find her. It was supposed to be 5 days. I was off by 1. I made a mistake." I pushed the Paris Post across the table toward her. Finally, a break from those miserable old people. "Your own words written while your mother was dying of thirst in my living room." Cade picked up the eviction notice color, draining from his face. What is this? A notice to quit. 30 days Nevada law. You occupied my house under the representation that care would be provided. Care was not provided. The arrangement is over. Marin's voice fractured. What comes next is the moment everything shifts, when the weight of what's been done to someone helpless finally lands, and a decision gets made that can't be taken back. Before we get there, I want to ask you something. If someone you loved was betrayed by the very person supposed to protect them, would you try to keep the peace, or would you let the law do what it's built for? Dad, please, you can't do this. Where are we supposed to go? I turned toward the door. You had enough money for Paris. Figure it out. The social worker moved to intervene, her voice carrying that practiced soothing tone. Mr. Holt, perhaps we could sit down together and discuss a care plan for the family. There is no family care plan. I am Della's guardian. These two have no standing in my home or on this floor. Any communication with me goes through my attorney. I left Randall's business card with the social worker and walked out. Marin tried to come after me into the hallway. I said a quiet word to the floor nurse about the guardianship restriction, and security materialized. I didn't look back. An hour later, I stood at Della's bedside while she slept. The monitors kept their soft rhythm. Her color had improved since 3 days ago. The nursing staff said she'd managed to squeeze someone's hand that morning. A small signal, but a signal. My phone lit up again. Dico Marin's number, call 108. I declined it and flipped the phone face down. Out in the parking lot, I knew Marin and Cade were somewhere beside a rental car, trying to absorb what had just occurred, working out where they stood, with 30 days on the clock and no roof lined up. I looked at Della's face, still in medicated sleep, and felt nothing but cold clarity. This was still only the start. 3 days after the hospital confrontation, I was back in Randall's conference room, going through the motion that had arrived from Marin's attorney, Gail Colbert. Budget rate firm standard letterhead arguments thin enough to read through. Randall slid his glasses down his nose. She's claiming they had a standing understanding permanent residency in exchange for caregiving. That's her position. Mine is that they agreed to actually provide care and didn't. Does an oral agreement hold when one party completely fails to perform? Not in Nevada, particularly not when the owner can demonstrate fraud. They represented themselves as caregivers, collected money on that basis, and provably delivered nothing. Her attorney has nothing. I reclaimed my house the day after the hospital confrontation, walked through it, room by room, touching furniture. I'd chosen walls, I'd painted rooms that were mine again. I'd forgotten what that felt like. Randall laid his own documents across the table. I'm recommending a countersuit. Fair market rent for a 4-bedroom home in that part of Henderson runs about $2,500 monthly. 36 months of occupancy, that's $90,000 you could have collected if they hadn't installed themselves as caregivers. I'd already done the arithmetic in my head and landed on the same figure. File it. Warren, you understand this closes the door on any reconciliation. There's nothing left to reconcile. They made their choices. I'm making mine. He drafted it while I watched fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. Legal language makes everything clean clinical. Defendant failed to perform agreed-upon services. Plaintiff sustained financial damages. No mention of Della's split lips or the bone-dry water bowl. The law didn't require those details. After the meeting, I stopped at my bank. The branch manager knew me on site, 15 years of the same location. Mr. Holt, I see this transfer has been running for 3 years. Just to confirm, you want it canceled permanently, not suspended. Permanently. The arrangement it was funding no longer exists. She entered the information, then placed a form in front of me. I signed it with the same pen I'd used to set up the original transfer. Still in my jacket pocket, blue ink, a little dried out. The symmetry of that felt right. Confirmation will reach you by email within 24 hours. Thank you. Randall phoned that afternoon. Adult Protective Services is opening a high-priority investigation. I spoke with Yvonne Ferris, their lead investigator. She's reviewed the medical reports and wants to interview Marin within the week. What does the timeline look like start to finish? 2 to 4 weeks from report to disposition. Given what's in the file, I'd expect a finding of substantiated neglect. That lands on a state registry, makes employment in healthcare education, anything touching vulnerable populations, very difficult. I took notes as he talked. Timelines, consequences, procedures. The prosecutor in me never really powered down. 2 days later, Randall forwarded me an email from Gail Colbert, professional on the surface, but with the texture of desperation underneath. Her client was confused about the countersuit. Perhaps all parties could sit down and reach a reasonable resolution. I called Randall rather than reply. What's reasonable about $90,000 in free housing? Her framing, not mine. Something else worth hearing. Gail rang my office 3 times today. Apparently, Marin received several pieces of mail simultaneously. APS investigation. Notice bank notification about the canceled transfer. All within about 4 hours. According to Gail, Marin then asked whether we could extend some compassion to a young woman going through a hard time. Young woman. Marin was 34 and had been old enough to know better for a long time. What did you tell her? That my client's ex-wife nearly died of neglect while this young woman was vacationing in Europe. Compassion seems misallocated. That evening, I spread 3 years of bank statements across my home office desk, every page printed and ordered. I took a yellow highlighter to each transfer. $1,800. June 2021, July 2021, August 2021. The highlighter squeaked against the paper in a rhythm that was oddly satisfying. Outside, a lawn crew worked the neighbor's yard. Normal neighborhood sounds I realized I'd barely registered in years. My phone sat face down on the desk screen, blocked while blocked numbers tried to reach me. 1,800 times 36. $64,800. Care payments, only not counting fair market rent. I noted in the margin of the final statement, recommend amending countersuit to include care payments as additional damages. The stack of marked statements grew. I reached for my phone to message Randall, then stopped. A car had turned into my driveway. Through the window, I watched it park the windshield glare, hiding the driver. It was Cade's rental sedan. I recognized the model and the airport lot sticker still visible on the back window. He sat there 3 full minutes before getting out and walking toward the front door. I met him there, but didn't open it wide. Stayed in the doorway with the air conditioning behind me while he stood in the July heat. Warren, can we talk? Things got out of hand at the hospital. Maybe there's a way to work something out. Man to man. I'm not your dad, and there's nothing to work out. You received an eviction notice. You have until the 19th of July. He shifted his weight sweat, already marking his collar. Come on. You know Marin made a mistake. She knows it too. But $90,000 in APS investigation, this is going to destroy us. We'll move out. We'll apologize. Just drop the lawsuits and let us get a fresh start. Fresh start. Interesting choice of words. Did Della get a fresh start after 5 days without water? His jaw tightened. Look, I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but Marin is your daughter. She made a serious mistake, but she's still family. Doesn't that count? Family. That's the same word she used when she moved in. Said family looks after family, then she booked a flight to Paris and left her mother to dehydrate. So, right now, Cade, that word isn't carrying much weight. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling. We've been looking at apartments. We're trying to comply. We just need a little more time. I didn't glance at his screen, kept my eyes on his face. I'll consider a conversation under 3 conditions. 1, public acknowledgement of what was done to Della. 2, written apology. 3, a payment plan for her medical bills. $11,200 so far. Meet those conditions and we can talk about the rest. Public acknowledgement. You want her to humiliate herself publicly. I want honesty. She had no difficulty posting from Paris for everyone to see. She can post about why she came home. He stood there another minute, maybe waiting for something in my face to shift. Nothing did. He walked back to his car. I called Randall as soon as he pulled away. He came to my house, tried to negotiate. Warren, I need you to be careful. Document everything. Don't meet with either of them unless you have a witness present. He wasn't a threat, just desperate. Desperate people are exactly the threat. What did you tell him? My 3 conditions. Public apology, acknowledgement of the neglect payment plan for the medical bills. After that, we talk. Randall sighed. You know they can't meet those conditions. Marin would never post a public apology. I know. That evening, my cousin Patrice texted me a screenshot. Marin's social media, a lengthy and emotional post. Sometimes the people who should protect you become your greatest source of pain. My father has chosen legal warfare over family. Over one mistake, one miscalculation. He's trying to destroy his own daughter's life. To everyone dealing with harsh parents who can't forgive, I see you. We're not alone. I forwarded it straight to Randall with a single note. For the file demonstrates continued dishonesty. The post collected sympathetic comments strangers I'd never heard of, sharing their own stories of difficult family situations rallying around her. For about 3 hours, Marin's version of events held. Then someone found the Paris post. I watched it unfold in real time as screenshots arrived on my phone. Someone had put together a side-by-side Marin's harsh father post next to the Eiffel Tower photo caption, and all. The comments turned. Wait, aren't you the one who posted about needing a break from miserable old people while you were in Paris? Didn't your mom end up in the hospital miscalculation? You left your disabled mother on her own for 6 days. That's not a miscalculation. That's neglect. Going on social media to play victim when screenshots exist takes nerve. Google works Marin. Within an hour, the post was gone, deleted. But the screenshots kept spreading. That evening, an email arrived from Novak, an old colleague from my prosecutor years. Subject line, saw the mess with your daughter. Sorry you're dealing with this. The message was short. Warren, someone forwarded me your daughter's social media situation. I pulled up the case hospital report, APS investigation, the whole picture. Just wanted you to know you're handling it right. Some of us remember the cases we built where family members preyed on elders. You're putting a stop to it. That's not cruelty. That's protection. Novak? I read it twice. I hadn't gone looking for validation, hadn't anticipated it either, but something in my chest gave a little. I closed the email and opened my blocked calls list. 17 attempts from Marin today alone. None had made it through. My thumb moved toward the unblock option. I put the phone down without touching the setting and went to the kitchen, where Della's wheelchair still occupied the corner, exactly as the paramedics had left it that day. I hadn't moved it yet. I would just, not tonight. The Adult Protective Services investigators arrived at Marin's motel mid-morning on July 15th. I knew because Randall had texted me the schedule they'd interview her first, then come to my house that afternoon. I spent the morning setting up my dining room the way I used to lay out case presentations, medical records in chronological order. On the left, enlarged photographs from the scene in the center, a timeline chart on the right, and a USB drive with security footage labeled and ready. 30 years of case preparation hadn't faded. Yvonne Ferris and Dale Ostrowski arrived at 2 o'clock. Professional handshakes, business cards, tablets, and folders. This was serious work. Mr. Holt, we appreciate you making time. I've organized everything chronologically. The medical records from her hospital admission are here. Note the attending physician's assessment, 4 to 5 days without adequate hydration or care. Photographs I took when I found her are in this folder. Security footage is queued to the relevant dates. Yvonne Ferris moved along the table, photographing my evidence layout with her department tablet. This camera covers your front entrance. Installed 3 years ago, motion-activated continuous recording. The timestamp is verified, it syncs with the master clock on my security system. I opened my laptop and ran the footage. June 10th, 6:47 a.m. Marin appeared, first checking her phone and smiling. Cade came out behind her with 2 large suitcases, then another trip for the carry-ons. They loaded everything into the car with the relaxed ease of people heading somewhere they wanted to be. Cade locked the front door. Marin said something that made him laugh. They drove away. Inside that house, Della sat in her wheelchair, unable to walk, unable to call for help, unable to reach the food stocked in the refrigerator 6 feet from where she sat. Yvonne Ferris watched the footage 3 times through. Dale Ostrowski typed continuously, fingers never letting up. And this footage shows your daughter and her boyfriend leaving on June 10th with luggage. Correct. You can see they're packed for travel. They didn't come back until June 19th after I'd already found Della and had her taken to the hospital. Dale turned through the medical reports. These pressure ulcers are consistent with extended immobility, no repositioning over several days. The dehydration markers in the blood work track with the timeline. The ER physician's professional assessment is in the report. Minimum 4 days of complete neglect. Yvonne Ferris studied the photographs I'd taken. The empty water bowl. The plate of crusted food. Della slumped and barely conscious. Professional as she was, something in her expression hardened. Mr. Holt, what was your understanding of the care arrangement? They moved into my home specifically to look after my ex-wife. I was paying $1,800 a month toward care expenses. I believe Della was being properly watched over. I was wrong. You were still financially supporting Miss Holt's care, even though you're divorced. Della is the mother of my daughter. She needed help. I provided it, or believed I was. They stayed 2 hours, took copies of everything, asked questions I answered precisely. When they left, Yvonne Ferris's farewell was formal, but her expression carried something I recognized from my own years building elder abuse cases. She'd seen enough. Randall called that evening. Warren, the supplementary filing is with the court. I included the APS investigation as evidence of bad faith and breach of the care agreement. The judge will see these weren't simply non-paying occupants, they were fraudulent ones who gained entry through misrepresentation and then violated the central term of the arrangement. Does that affect the eviction? Makes it airtight. They can't assert any equitable interest in the property when residency was obtained through false pretenses, and the core obligation was never honored. After the call, I sat in the living room where I'd found Della a month before. The wheelchair was gone, now moved to the care facility where she was working her way back. The room felt empty, but cleaner somehow. My phone stayed dark on the coffee table. No calls from Maren today. Maybe reality was finally registering. Or maybe she was too busy packing. 4 days to eviction. I'd already walked the house, separated what was theirs from what was mine, efficient and clinical, the way I used to process evidence rooms. My laptop was open to Randall's email. Court filing complete. Eviction proceeds as scheduled. A PS report expected within 2 weeks. I closed the lid. Probably should have felt something: satisfaction, vindication, some measure of regret. Mostly I felt worn out. I crossed to the window and looked at the street outside. Quiet suburban evening. Tomorrow I'd start preparing for eviction day. Tonight I stood there watching nothing in particular, waiting on what came next. Deputy Novak arrived at exactly 10 o'clock in the morning on July 19th. I had the door open before he knocked. Folder, ready court order, and proof of service. Mr. Holt, I'm Deputy Novak. I'm here to enforce the eviction order for Maren Holt and Cade Pruitt. Are the respondents currently on the premises? They're inside. They were notified this would happen today at 10 o'clock. Everything you need is in that folder. He reviewed the paperwork and nodded. Everything looks in order. I'll need you nearby, but please allow me to handle all contact with the respondents. This is a civil matter, and we want to keep it that way. I stepped back and let him work. Through the wall I heard his knock, Maren's voice high strained, then Cade's lower and flattened. The deputies measured even tone, explaining they had until 1 p.m. to clear the property. Through the window, I watched them carry boxes to the curb. A rental truck sat waiting, driven by Cade's cousin. Then came the furniture, their bed frame, Cade's desk, the cheap couch they'd brought in. 3 years of accumulated possessions loaded out piece by piece while neighbors found reasons to look elsewhere. Maren tried to approach me during a water break. Deputy Novak stepped in smoothly. Ma'am, I'd advise against that. This is a legal proceeding. Any communication should go through your attorneys. She called toward the house anyway. Dad, please. Where are we supposed to go? I stood at the window and didn't move, didn't answer. Ma'am, you need to focus on clearing your belongings. During one trip, Maren dropped a framed photograph. It broke apart on the driveway, a picture from her childhood, maybe 7 years old, smiling somewhere in a park. She crouched to gather the pieces and began crying. I felt something then. A brief ache, the old reflex of being a father. But that child had been gone for a long time. At 12:45, Cade loaded the last box onto the truck. Deputy Novak walked them to their vehicle. Maren got into the passenger seat without looking back at the house. The keys were surrendered. The deputy passed them to me. My locksmith pulled up 2 minutes later, tools already laid out. I'd scheduled him the day before for 1 p.m. He had the locks rekeyed in 35 minutes. Fresh keys in my hand, my house mine alone again. I went through each room once everyone had cleared out. The guest room where Cade had his office empty. The bedroom where Maren had slept, the bare mattress she hadn't been able to fit in the truck. I'd deal with that tomorrow. The living room where Della's wheelchair had stood. That corner still felt occupied somehow. I photographed every room, nail holes, carpet wear, small damage. Evidence collection. Old habits don't go anywhere. That afternoon, I drove to the care facility and found Della in the courtyard, the afternoon sun working across the patio. I sat beside her and talked more than I usually did. The house is mine again. Just me now. Quiet. I forgot how quiet it used to be. I'm going to paint the guest room. Maybe blue. You always liked blue. A faint sound escaped her fingers, tightening around mine with what little strength remained. The stroke had stolen so much from her, yet the therapist reported real progress, better appetite, more response to the world around her. The doctor leaned in. "You're doing better. That's good." "That's really good." I stayed the full hour, helped one of the nurses get dinner into her, then sat with her until her eyes closed in the warm afternoon light. Randall's voicemail was already queued when I reached the parking lot. "Warren eviction complete." Good. The countersuit hearing is still on for August. They've gone silent on settlement, so we push forward. Also, APS preliminary finding landed. Substantiated neglect. Criminal referral didn't make the cut, but the finding sits on record forever. Della's condition was the only thing that kept it from being worse. Call me Monday. That evening I came home to a quiet kitchen. 3 new keys from the locksmith sat gleaming on the counter, bright metal, not a scratch on them. I picked one up, turned it over in my palm. 3 year strangers had access to this house. Not anymore. I pulled open the refrigerator, grabbed a cold iced tea I'd earned, broke the seal, then stopped before it reached my lips. Just stood there, bottle in hand, eyes on the backyard through the window. Mesquite trees going dark against a fading sky. Cicadas winding up for the night. An ordinary Nevada summer evening. My house, my rules, my life. I lifted the bottle and caught my own face in the glass, ghostly in the dusk. The man looking back was older than I felt, harder around the edges, but upright. The countersuit hearing was coming in August. I intended to be ready. The guardianship proceeding lasted under 20 minutes. Judge Calloway went through the medical records, the APS determination, my emergency contact paperwork, then asked whether Marin planned to fight it. Gail Colbert, whatever budget lawyer she'd scraped together, shook her head. "No, Your Honor, we don't contest." "Very well. Guardianship is granted, Mr. Holt. Do you understand the responsibilities this entails?" "I do, Your Honor. I've already arranged placement at a licensed care facility and will ensure she receives appropriate medical attention and quality of life." The judge put her signature on the order. Permanent guardianship, full legal authority over Della's care, and every medical call that came with it. Everything Marin had ignored for 3 years was now mine by law. The court clerk pressed certified copies into my hands. I stepped out into August heat that landed against me like something solid. Randall was waiting at the bottom of the courthouse steps. "Congratulations. About as clean as these hearings ever go, because there was genuinely nothing they could contest. Evidence like that doesn't leave room for argument. You've got total authority now. Nobody overrules you on her care." I squared the papers and slid them into my portfolio. "Good, because I'm moving her to Desert Ridge Care tomorrow." Later that afternoon, I walked the facility with Loretta Hance, the director. Precise, methodical someone who ran a tight operation and knew it. She walked me through the physical therapy room, the parallel bars, the resistance equipment. The memory care wing, locked doors lighting, kept deliberately low and soft. The courtyard shade structures overhead, engineered for Nevada summers. "We're built around dignity and quality of life," she said. "A lot of our residents have lost mobility, or the ability to communicate clearly, but we treat every one of them as a person, with preferences, with a personality. What does overnight staffing look like? 1 nurse per 8 residents through the night. 2 to 10 on day shifts. Physical therapy runs 3 times a week, occupational therapy twice, and we carry a full-time activities coordinator." I cross-referenced what she was describing against the research I'd done the other places I'd walked through. This was the one. Not a showroom, not a warehouse. Right. "What's the earliest admission date we could take her tomorrow?" "Monthly rate is $4,500. First and last, required up front." "That's acceptable." I sat at my kitchen table that night and wrote the check. $9,000. 2 months to start. A reasonable price for knowing she was somewhere safe. Somewhere the people around her actually gave a damn. 2 days later, I trailed the medical transport van to Desert Ridge Care, both hands easy on the wheel. They moved Della from the van to a wheelchair with practiced efficiency, no wasted motion. Her bag came with me. I wasn't handing it off to anyone. Inside a photo album going back before the stroke, her soft green fleece blanket, the reading glasses she couldn't manage anymore, but kept close because they made her feel like herself. I arranged her room the way she'd want it, bed angled toward the window, photo album within arm's reach on the nightstand, robe on the bathroom hook. Nothing grand, just the small things that said this space belonged to her. Loretta caught me working on the curtain angle. She's settled in the common area whenever you're ready to say your goodbyes for today. I'll be back tomorrow and the day after, every day. That's wonderful. Steady visits make the adjustment so much easier. Marin got a letter that week. Clean letterhead, precise legal phrasing. All visitation requests regarding Della Holt require prior approval from legal guardian Warren Holt. Direct all inquiries to Randall Keene's office. I thought about the moment she read it, the instant it registered that she now needed my permission to sit beside her own mother. Good. Let her turn that over in her mind a while. She went to Ruth Ann Beckel, someone from the church looking for a lifeline. I found out because Ruth Ann rang me 3 days later while I was painting the guest room, Cade's old room a calm blue, Della's color rolling right over the nail holes where his motivational posters used to hang, covering the evidence of him. Warren, it's Ruth Ann Beckel. I'm reaching out about Marin. She showed up at my door crying. She's in a bad way. I know this whole situation has been awful, but she is still your daughter. Can't you find some path through this that doesn't level her completely? I laid the brush across the tray and wiped the paint from my hands. Ruth Ann. I hear you, but my attorney is handling this. Randall Keene's office. If Marin wants to open settlement discussions, she puts in writing what she did and reimburses Della's medical costs. $15,000. Warren, be realistic. There's no $15,000 there. They're behind on rent as it is. I've been inside that apartment. It's cramped and the neighborhood is bad. Cade's in retail. They're scraping by. They found money for Paris. They found money to live in my house, rent-free for 3 years, while I wired them $1,800 every month. They'll manage. Ruth Ann shifted her tone, going softer. I know you've been wounded by all this. Nobody would question that. But she's your daughter, your only one. Is this the way you really want it to finish? This is your daughter. My daughter stood by while her mother deteriorated. There are things blood can't erase. The line went quiet, then a long exhale from Ruth Ann. I'll keep your family in my prayers, Warren. You do that. I pressed N, lifted the brush, and went back to the wall. Smooth strokes, methodical, passes the room, changing under my hand. Randall checked in later that week. They came at you through the churchwoman. You did the right thing turning it back to me. Every settlement conversation runs through my office. That said, Warren, they're going to walk into that hearing crying poverty. The judge could shave the number down or spread it thin. Then spread it thin. $500 a month. Takes time, but every payment clears on the first, and every time it does, they know exactly what it's for. A beat of silence. That's vindictive. That's accountability. 30 months of payments, Randall. 30 months of that date circling back around, of what they did sitting in their bank statement. $500 out the door on the first of every month. Every single month. Understood. I'll build that into the contingency plan. 2 weeks to the hearing, I'll be there. I made Della part of my daily schedule. Every afternoon at 2, after her lunch, before the evening programs began, she turned up in different spots each time. Her room, the common area once in physical therapy, with a staff member walking her through arm work. 2 weeks in, I found her outside in the courtyard during the afternoon hour. A care assistant was holding court with a small cluster of residents reading from some mystery novel, switching voices for each character. Della was tucked into a patch of broken shade eyelids half down, face soft. She noticed me coming, and something shifted in her expression, a brightness that didn't need words. That look, that bare flicker of recognition and gladness moved something loose inside me. I took the spot beside her on the bench, reached for her hand. Her fingers folded around mine, the grip thin but real. You look good. They're taking care of you. A small sound from her throat. Could have meant agreement. Could have just been her way of saying she heard me. Nearby, another family had claimed a corner of the courtyard. 3 generations grandmother in a wheelchair, her daughter somewhere in middle age, 2 grandchildren, who looked maybe 8 and 10. The kids were unfolding drawings they had made, holding them up. The daughter kept one hand on her mother the whole time, all of them going at once, voices overlapping someone's phone, out for a photo. Ordinary moments, the kind that just happen when a family stays whole. We watched without a word between us. Della's thumb shifted against my palm. I pressed her hand lightly. The assistant closed the book. Anyone in the mood for a cookie? We've got snickerdoodle and lemon shortbread. Della turned to look at me, a question behind her eyes. I gave a small nod. Snickerdoodle. She loves snickerdoodle. The assistant smiled, tilted the wheelchair toward the activities room, and Della rolled away with the others. I stayed put on the bench, Watched the staff move through the courtyard, unhurried, attentive, treating everyone there like they mattered. My phone went off at my hip. Message from Randall, hearing locked in. August 28th, 9 a.m., Judge Calloway's courtroom. Final offer from opposing counsel. They'll go $5,000. No admission of wrongdoing. How do you want to play it? I wrote back 2 words. Declined. See you in court. Cleared the thread. Tilted my head back toward the open desert sky, not a cloud anywhere in it. That hard, merciless blue that tells you it's August in Nevada. 2 weeks to the hearing. Then this chapter would close one way or the other. Judge Calloway brought the courtroom to order at 9:15 on August 28th. Marin and Cade had walked in 10 minutes behind schedule. Gail Colbert murmuring apologies as they found their seats at the defense table. I'd been there since 8:30, settled in next to Randall. At counsel table, my leather portfolio squared precisely with the table edge. I wore my only suit, dark gray, the same one from my retirement ceremony 4 years back. It hung a little looser than it used to. I'd shed weight over the summer. Stress will do that. Though I never felt stressed, just focused. This case arises from eviction proceedings related to allegations of elder neglect. Mr. Holt, through counsel, is seeking compensation for unpaid housing costs and medical expenses. Miss Shaw and Mr. Pruitt are the respondents. Let's proceed. Randall rose, buttoned his jacket, unhurried, deliberate, exactly the way we'd walked through it 3 times in his office. Your Honor, my client Warren Holt provided housing to his daughter and son-in-law for 3 years under the explicit understanding that they would care for his ex-wife Della Holt, a stroke patient requiring constant supervision. Not only did they fail in that duty, they abandoned her entirely for 6 days, while vacationing in Paris, which produced a life-threatening medical emergency from dehydration and neglect. He walked Judge Calloway through the full timeline, dates medical records, financial documentation. Building it out the way, a mason lays a wall. Foundation first, then the evidence course, then the conclusion. The way I'd shown junior prosecutors how to do it decades ago. When he cued the security footage, the screen at the front of the room blinked on. June 10th, 6:47 a.m. There was Marin, phone up, face relaxed and smiling at whatever was on her screen. Cade moved through the frame with a suitcase, then came back for another one. Carry-on bags next. Everything loaded with the easy, unhurried manner of 2 people who had no concerns in the world. I didn't watch the screen. I watched Marin's face instead. Watched her flinch at the sight of her past self, so light, so unworried. Watched the muscle in Cade's jaw pull tight when the timestamp burned in the corner of the frame. 6 days before my scheduled return. 6 days. Della would be alone in that house. Randall froze the frame. This is them leaving, Your Honor. The home behind them contains Della Holt, who cannot walk, cannot reach food or water on her own, and has no means of calling for help. Gail Colbert objected, but there was no force behind it. Your Honor, my clients have acknowledged an error in judgment. An error. Randall turned from the screen. This wasn't forgetting to water a plant. This was abandoning a vulnerable human being. Judge Calloway lifted her hand. Mr. Keene, I've reviewed the evidence. Ms. Colbert, your response. Gail stood, and I nearly felt something like pity for her. Nearly. She'd inherited a losing case and was doing what she could with almost nothing to work with. Your Honor, my clients acknowledge that a serious error in judgment occurred. That said, they have already suffered real consequences, loss of their housing, loss of income, significant damage to their reputation. They're subsisting on minimum wage work at this point. The dollar figures being requested would be financially devastating. Judge Calloway leaned forward slightly. Ms. Colbert, your clients occupied a valuable property without paying rent for 3 years. That represents substantial financial benefit. They also received monthly payments earmarked for care expenses. What care, in fact, did they provide? They provided care for 2 years. Your Honor, this was one incident that nearly killed someone. The judge's tone sharpened. I have read those medical reports. 4 to 5 days without adequate water or supervision, a wheelchair-bound stroke patient. That is not an incident. That is neglect. Continue, Mr. Keene. Randall produced another document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into the record the conclusion of the Adult Protective Services investigation. Proceed. He read it slowly without inflection. Case 2-024-6-1-18 4, 7. Finding substantiated neglect. The evidence supports that Della Holt, a vulnerable adult with significant care needs, was left without appropriate supervision or care for approximately 5 days, resulting in medical emergency and hospitalization. Contributing factors include caregiver absence without adequate alternative arrangements. The words settled over the courtroom, official, documented, permanent, and true. Judge Calloway looked across at Marin and Cade. Do either of you wish to make a statement? Marin got to her feet, hands shaking at her sides. I made a terrible mistake. I thought Dad was coming back earlier. I miscalculated the dates. I would never intentionally hurt my mother. I love her. I'm so sorry. Her voice cracked apart. We can't afford what he's asking. We're trying, but we just can't. Please. Cade stood beside her. We're willing to make reasonable payments, but $15,000 we'll be paying forever. Judge Calloway set down her pen, wrote something on her notes, looked back up. You'll be paying for 30 months, which is considerably less time than you lived in Mr. Holt's house without contributing financially. Here is my ruling. She read from her notes, voice level, and final. The respondents will pay $15,000 in restitution for medical expenses at a rate of $500 monthly for 30 months. They will also pay $8,000 for Mr. Holt's legal fees within 90 days, or be subject to wage garnishment. The APS finding of substantiated neglect is entered into this case record as a matter of public documentation. Marin gasped and covered her mouth. This is a civil matter. No criminal charges are being pursued. But let me be clear. This was serious. You endangered someone who could not protect herself, someone who depended on you. That breach of trust carries consequences. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down a sharp crack that rang off the walls. I stood and took Randall's hand. Thank you. You're welcome. Justice served. I acknowledged the judge with a nod and moved toward the doors. My footsteps came back to me off the marble, steady and even. Behind me, Marin's voice. Dad. Dad, please? Randall stepped between us. Miss Shaw, no direct contact. Everything through attorneys. I pushed through into the corridor and kept moving. At the elevators, Gail Colbert had caught up to Marin and Cade. I caught pieces as I went past. Payment schedule, first payment due, I'm sorry. The evidence. Outside, the August heat met me like an open furnace. I walked to my car, got the engine and the AC running, and gave it a minute before I pulled out. Traffic was light mid-morning. I made good time to Desert Ridge Care, found Della in her room. The afternoon sun came through the window at a soft angle filtered down by the shade screen. She was sitting upright in her specialized chair, the one engineered to support her weak side. Hey, I said, dragging the visitor chair over. The hearing happened. It's over. You'll keep getting care. Good care. Always. I promised you that. I'm keeping it. She squeezed my hand, made a small sound deep in her throat. The most she could give me, but it was enough. I repainted the guest room blue. You always wanted that room blue. Looks right now. Peaceful. The house feels different mine again. Quiet. Her eyes found my face and held there. Something moved between us, understanding maybe, or gratitude, or simply connection that had no need for words. I know I said after a long silence. Me too. I stayed an hour helped out when the staff brought her afternoon snack. Apple juice and vanilla wafers. She worked the straw steadily, slow but sure. Progress. When I headed for the door, the care assistant walked me out. She's doing really well, Mr. Holt. The fact that you come every day, it makes a real difference. I'll be back tomorrow, we know. She brightens up the moment we mention you're on your way. That evening I settled onto my back patio with a cup of coffee and watched the sun go down in layers of orange, purple, and deep red colors I'd stopped registering during the years Marin and Cade had filled my house with their noise and their carelessness and their neglect. My phone rang once. Randall. Well, we won. Complete victory. You should feel satisfied. I feel tired. That's reasonable. It's been a long summer. Will you reconcile with Marin eventually? People do forgive given time. I watched a hawk work slow circles above me, riding thermals, hunting. I don't know. Maybe years from now. Maybe never. She chose Paris over her mother's life, put it on public display, smiled loading her luggage into the car. I can't unknow that. Fair enough. You've got the payment schedule. First payment due. September 1st. They'll make it or face garnishment. Good. Get some rest, Warren. You earned it. After the call, I stayed put as night came on. The coffee cooled in my hand and I didn't bother moving. Stars pressed through one by one, more of them visible out here in the desert than almost anywhere else. The glow from downtown Las Vegas was just a smear of light low on the horizon. My phone sat dark and silent. No calls from Marin, no texts, no voicemails. She had Randall's contact information if she ever wanted to discuss visiting her mother. If she ever arrived at something real, not the courtroom performance, but an actual reckoning, I would hear about it through the proper channels. I wasn't expecting that call anytime soon. The payments would come regardless. $500. First of every month for 30 months. Automatic withdrawal same date every time. Randall had set it up. $500 leaving their account while I sat with Della. While I refreshed the rooms of my house one wall at a time. While I lived my life without interference. 30 months of a recurring reminder that choices carry weight, that people who can't defend themselves still matter, that justice, when you pursue it with patience and without compromise, can be reached. Somewhere out in the dark, a coyote opened up a long, rising call. Another answered from a different quarter, then a third. The desert was theirs at night. Creatures that live by being sharp, careful, and merciless toward error. I understood that in a way I hadn't before this summer. I got up, took my empty cup inside, and turned the lock. My door, my house, my life. The lights went out room by room as I passed through. That's where this one ends, not with a door slamming or a tearful reunion, just a man walking out of a courtroom, papers in hand, and a quiet evening on a back patio watching the stars come through. This summer cost me things I'll never get back. Sleep. The version of my daughter I used to believe in. A marriage I'd already let go of, once now entangled all over again, in grief and legal filings. But it also gave me something I didn't expect: clarity. You find out who people really are, not in the good years, but in the moment when no one is watching and someone vulnerable is counting on them. I believe God puts those moments in front of us for a reason, even when the reason feels like cruelty at first. Here's what I took away from all of it. If someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them, not the explanation that comes after. Document everything. When the time comes to defend someone who can't defend themselves, paper and dates matter more than any promise ever made out loud. Never let the desire to keep the peace become a reason to let wrong things go unchallenged. Peace built on silence isn't peace. And if you're raising a child, teach them early that love is a verb, something you show up and do, especially when it's inconvenient. If this dad's revenge story moved you, or if it reminded you of someone in your own life who needed someone to stand up for them, I hope you'll share it. Pass it to a friend, a sibling, someone going through something hard and needing to know that doing the right thing, the slow, methodical, unglamorous right thing, is always worth it. Leave me a comment and tell me what you thought. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Dad's Revenge so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for listening all the way through. Take care of yourselves and the people counting on you.